Well, this might be the best Spock's Beard album that we've had in a very long time. Let's dive into it. Myth of the Monstrophus by Ryo Okamoto. So Ryo Okamoto is, man, he's like a legend at this point in terms of the keyboards, getting his start in Spock's Beard with their second album of Beware of Darkness, and been being with the band ever since. He's one of the staple members at this point and one of the legacy members. And what I really love is Ryo's ability to create sounds, create soundscapes, and every once in a while just blowing the doors down with some really meaty and technical playing styles. He did get his start early on with a handful of solo albums back in the 80s with Solid Gold, Make and Rock, and Synthesizer. And if you haven't seen the front cover for Solid Gold yet, do yourself a favor and check it out. It is just peak 80s. From there, in 2002, he put out his other kind of solo work of Coming Through, which I honestly haven't even heard. So, but 20 years in the future, we now have Myth of the Monstrophus. And honestly, I don't know why this wouldn't have been a brilliant collaboration for Spock's Beard, because most of the Spock's Beard fellas are on this. It's just Ryo's the one that's manning the hold. All of the DNA and all of the signature sounds of Spock's Beard is really prominent and found on this album to its full potential. You know, like you have a lot of staple Spock's Beard individuals on here, like Alan Morse, Nick DiVergilo, Jimmy Keegan, Ted Leonard, and you even have some prog staples like Steve Hackett. The amount of like guest musicians that he has on here, yeah, you can fill a boat with all these guys on here. And what I also really enjoy is the different iterations of Spock's Beard on here. Like I mentioned, you have Alan Morse on here playing most of the guitars, but Nick DiVergilo, Jimmy Keegan, and Ted Leonard, all three of them kind of holding the, I don't want to say frontman staple after Neil Morse left the band, but like definitely being the main powerhouse for the vocal works and kind of like the frontman. And each one of them gets their own time to shine on each of the, like on all these different tracks on here. It really is a treat, you know. It's almost a homecoming for a lot of these boys for this track. The music that's found around it, the 6 to 8 tracks depending on the release that you have, because the Japanese edition has 2 bonus tracks on it. Is just pure, unadulterated, brilliant prog, and the kind of retro symphonic prog that I have come to love. As I mentioned at the beginning, this one's probably the best work that a Spock's Beard family member has put out, probably since Brief Nocturnes, if I'm being perfectly honest, and this even includes a lot of the pattern-seeking animals and all the other solo works that a lot of these artists have done. Starting off the bat, we have Mirror Mirror, which plays homage to the Spock's Beard. This was the Star Trek episode where Spock has the beard, his alter self, the nega self. I'm loving how distinctly Spock's Beard this is, without being just a retread of the flavors and essences that we would have before. You can really feel that Ryo is the ones that is, manning the helm in this case. He's the one that's providing the main punch on here, providing such brilliant and juicy keyboard works. And what I love about Mirror Mirror, outside of everything that I've already mentioned, is the drive. And this drive can be felt throughout the entirety of the album. And it really does go to show how much of an orchestration and how much of a composer of music Ryo is, by having this isolated album to showcase just how much influence he had with Spock's Beard and how much of that drive was found within it. I love Mirror Mirror in being this driven, very go-getting, very powerful, very energetic track that leads us right into the second track of Turning Point, and it starts off with such a powerful drum work, and Ryo is able to really orchestrate a fully flushed out album. Now that we're coming into the second point, I'm realizing that, the first track wasn't just the single. The first track really was the beginning track to a full flushed out album, because a lot of the kind of solo works that I've had from a lot of the prog artists the past couple of years, they feel very solo. You know, it's very isolated. It is whatever their craft is, whatever it was, like a guitar work or a keyboard work. It was very isolated, and they still played around within it and had some fleshed out moments, but this one is like a fully fleshed out album. It really feels very organic, and as I mentioned, I mean, they could have very, very easily, you know, tinkered one or two things on here and called it a Spock Spirit album, and Turning Point is the perfect example of that, starting off so poignantly and so brilliantly with a powerful drumming styles that goes into this overlay of playing between the keyboards and the guitar work. It spends so much time with the guitar works and not just the keyboards, even though Ryo has one amazing keyboard moments near the midpoint of this track. What I love is the dripping styles within the vocal works on here. How almost sinister it feels. It's much more of this theatrical singing style on here. I mean, Ryo didn't have to do that. He could have very easily just had an instrumental album, but instead it feels more like a unified band. Then we come into Watchmaker, Time on His Side, and it does feel like Ryo took Abacab from Genesis and made it listenable. It feels like Ryo is taking the sounds and the ideas that Tony Banks, Mike Rutherford, and Phil Collins was putting down on Abacab and being like, I see what you're doing, but let's actually make it prog. So you've got that sounds from Abacab, that really strange, almost grating keyboard work, but it builds into something amazing by the midpoint within Ryo's playing styles. Like that mid section of that keyboard solo is so dripping with beauty and so tangible that I'm like, num 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 num. That's what I love with this style of prog. This is what I love and why I come for progressive rock, and man, I'm loving the dips and dives within this one. Then we come into Maximum Velocity, and I enjoy the fact that we've had three pretty big, pretty meaty, you know, pretty bumpin' and driven tracks before it, and the first half of this track is very subdued. It's a lot more somber. It's a little bit more intimate in that case. It opens up with just the singer and the guitar, and Ryo's just kind of in the background providing a little bit of overlay of sounds, a little bit more of atmosphere on here. So it's able for, you know, the music to really blossom and really come into its own. By the midpoint, though, it has blossomed into a beautiful flower, and we have a little bit more of that bump in atmosphere. The bass comes in pretty prominently and chunky in that sense. And so by like the last minute or so, we have this brilliant guitar play out that really we have transitioned right into a rock proper song that really did take that 8-minute journey, so that it wasn't just, you know, this small climb and then a small dip. It really had a climb right up to the peak, and we are allowed this big meaty moment to usher us forth. And Ryo, for the most part, is kind of just taking a little bit of a side step on this one, and he's really allowing the guitar works to lead the main song through. Then we come into the fifth track of Chrysalis, and again, we start off very somber, very slowly, and I like the gradual build on this one. It doesn't lead to that same kind of rock anthem that we had with Maximum Velocity, but it has a very satisfying, very like, I don't know, Supper's Ready ending on it. It has that really slow, big, powerful march to it that allows for it to basically for us to take a breather before we get into the 22-minute epic of the myth of the Mostrophus. And man, I'm loving this piece. I'm loving this track. People take notes of how to construct a epic, a 20+ minute epic, because Ryo nails it on this one. I love how the storytelling aspect of this track really goes forth, with the first part giving us context, telling us about this massive monster that has this insatiable desire to eat and consume and destroy. After consuming and destroying, he goes into like 100,000 year slumber, only to reemerge into the present day and just create chaos on it. It has just enough of that cheese. You know, like when they're talking about the history and we have the lyrics of "Don't eat me now. Don't eat me, Monstrophus. Don't eat me now." You know, it's just like just enough of that cheese because it's the history, right? We're not a part of that narrative at this point. But I'm loving how the narrator or the storyteller at this point is, you know, painting a picture of this creature. Once it is up and arms with our current society and making all this destruction, the thing that saves the day, because all of our weapons are useless against it and it just wants to consume, we were able to discover this long lost cave where people did drive it back, and it was driven through this unity song. It was song that tamed the beast. It was music that crippled the creature. The hero of the day was this prog rock individual who gathered people together and sang one of the most memorable moments of progressive rock within this decade, like within the past 3 years. I'd even go so far as to say one of the most memorable passages of music I've heard for almost a full decade. This whole whoa, 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 whoa. I would like wake up singing this. I would have this stretch of music in my head for days on end, and I still do. Like it's one of the tracks that, I don't know, it gets into your head, it gets its meats into you, and you realize that, like, why hasn't anybody ever done this before? Why hasn't anybody put this down on paper before? And I love the fact that it was this note sequence, this music that unified everybody together to sing this song to, again, quell the creature, that drove the creature back to its slumber and allowed us the savior of the day. What I love, beyond just the storyline, is how the music blends within it. You know, you've got the setup at the very beginning that puts down the roadmap for where this track is going to go. It's very bumping. At points it's very grating. Ryo is kind of the mastermind behind the whole thing. It's very keyboard led in that sense, and it has lots of very interesting and intricate dips and dives that I really, really do appreciate. So by the time we get into basically the crowning jewel, the centerpiece of this being this call to arms, this unity song, it allows the track to really elevate it up into this big masterful moment. And they don't just like put it down and then let it simmer. You know, they introduce it in a very small and intimate way, and then it grows as more people are hearing it. It grows as it gets that face of the prog rocker that's singing it, and then it grows as it becomes this unified song that slays the beast. And I will admit, I got pretty moved by the end of it. I got pretty emotional when they were singing it, you know, the second or third time, reprising it. That then allows for the final play out of this track that builds into an epic conclusion, very reminiscent of like A Supper's Ready, very slowed down, very powerful. This is something that Neil Morse and Spock's Beard does a lot, but here it's recontextualized. It's the storyline that's bringing us through, and man, I love it, and I love thinking about it too. I mean, I'm going to talk a little bit and sidestep music for just a moment to kind of recontextualize it when we're talking about the big monster movies of the past, when it specifically relates to like Japan and whatnot. Because I mean, Godzilla was an allegory for the atomic bomb, and if you think about it, within the 40s and 50s, how the two nations between the US and Japan viewed nuclear fallout. Nuclear fallout for Japan was this massive radioactive, indestructible, destroying monster. And for US, it was like Superman, and it was the superheroes, especially when you're talking about it in this context, and especially within today's day and age, especially within the past, like within this decade, against a lot of the racial strife that a lot of Asian Americans specifically faced within the first couple of months within the lockdown pandemic, and even as much as they have held for so long. Having that face of this indestructible force that they feel, having this tension and these crimes and hate crimes, it's maybe not a perfect one-to-one allegory for it, but you can definitely draw the comparison. You know, you have that big destructive force that just rampages through their lives that they have no control over. And what's one of the main things that kind of solves that is like understanding and bringing together under unity. And what can that be better than a unifying song? I don't want to say that, oh, you can solve racism by singing to people. That's definitely not what I'm saying, because it's not a perfect allegory, but you can draw comparisons to it. And I really enjoy thinking about it in that sense. You know, it provides a deeper layer of context for this track and for this music. You know, I'd put money on saying that Ryo wasn't completely ignorant to this side of the music. He wouldn't be completely oblivious to this style of storytelling. And I really, really appreciate that that was what saved the day. It was the unification. It was coming together as a people. So yeah, okay, I'll switch back into the music proper and get off my soapbox in that case. Because when I was thinking about it in that kind of context, I got very, very moved, and I got very, very emotional in that sense. And that was part of the reason why I was getting so emotional and why it hit me so hard. Yeah, oh boy, at the end of the day, what else can I say about the myth of Monstrophus by Ryo Okamoto? I don't really have too much else, so I will just say the myth of the Monstrophus by Ryo Okamoto is one that I absolutely love with my whole heart. Yeah, this is one that I absolutely recommend. It gets the note seal of approval. Like, I'm blown away by this album, and I keep coming back to it because of how fun it is, how catchy it is, how tangible it is. And man, I can't get that big track, like that big epic, out of my head with that whole unifying song. As I mentioned, I will just listen to just that over and over and over again. So yeah, that's what I've got for Myth of the Monstrophus by Ryo Okamoto. What did you guys think about this album? Did you love it? Did you hate it? Whatever you thought, please let me know by commenting down below. As I mentioned, do not sleep on this one. Give it a listen. This is probably one of my favorite symphonic prog, retro prog outfits of this year, maybe of this decade. So yeah, the hype is real for this one. Go and check it out. Go and check this one out. So that's all I've got for you guys today. Thank you all so much for watching. As always, you guys are definitely the best. And until next time, notes out.